Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Marissa Rader Show. And I have another lovely guest with me today. Her name is Liza, and I met her last year at the Woman to Woman conference. And I could just feel the calm that she brings into a room, and it was amazing. And then after talking to women that have worked with you, Liza, I was like, oh my gosh, I need more Liza in my life. So, welcome
I
and
love
tell us
that.
a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, my name's Liza Heidelberger. Live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and have been in my business for 3 years now, which is really exciting. It's called Released Emotional Health Solutions, and just this understanding that, man, there are things that we all need to be released from, but also things we need to be released into, and that's I think, when people end up coaching and doing what I do, it just comes from a huge part of my story, of things that I personally experienced, and I did the hard work. I did the hard work and got the training and did a lot of my own inner work, and am still doing it, which is a huge part of everything that is wrapped up in who I am and what I do. And so I hear that so much, that you bring the calm in the room, or people, like, they say that all the time. That comes from a really special place. That doesn't mean I'm always the calm person all the time. You can ask my kids and my husband. But it's like it's a result of doing a lot of work, and ultimately for me too, my faith is such a huge part of who I am and what I do. So
Yes. Earlier this summer, we met on Mondays, and it was just an hour or so of women coming together and celebrating their faith and being intentional. Words are hard. Intentional about their faith and building it into their week. And that was such a non negotiable for me. The space that you created and the approach that you took to that was just a testament to your ability to communicate what God is putting on your heart. And it made me even more excited to have you be a speaker at the conference this year, because I was like, my gosh, this is just, and it just, you walked away just feeling really good.
yes, yes, yes. And yeah, it's it's interesting because a lot of people, like, I'm not overtly, like, very faith-based with all of my marketing. I have a huge heart to work with everyone. Like, the things that I've been trained in, they're for everyone. But those spaces that, like, we're really just really getting in the presence of God, like, God does things that no healer or no person trained like I am would be able to do. And so, yeah, it was really special having all of you in that, and to be able, that was like a business planning space, to be able to really set time apart and hear from God clearly about what he has for business, I think is it's how I run everything and what I do. So it was really cool to be able
Yes.
to hear that. Yeah.
Uh, well, and I just like testimonial wise to that space that you created, I went into it not really knowing what to expect, but it was the beginning of summer. My kids were home. Our daycare closed back in December, which I think I mentioned in like every episode because I still have some PTSD from that. Like, did we really do this? Is this really life now?
Right.
But I went into it thinking, okay, am I really meant to be doing this coaching? Am I really meant to be putting on this conference? Am I also supposed to be doing this product based business? I was feeling kind of chaotic and didn't really know. I wasn't taking the time to sit with myself and sit with what my purpose was. And I was ready to give up one or the other just to have some calm in my life. And that whole month, every time I left a phone call, we had some time to sit and kind of marinate in it. I hate that word, but it really was just some time to sit and feel and think and listen and take in what I was supposed to be doing with all of the things. And every time I walked away from a phone call, I had a very clear understanding. And I was able to see the signs from the week before, or the pushes that were being brought my way that I was maybe ignoring, or that I was like, I'm trying to simplify life. Like, quit trying to make it harder for me. Like, that's not supposed to be what's happening. Like, the goal is to like be calm so that I can be a better person and a better mom and all of these things. And what really happened was I learned to do those things in the thick of the busy season.
Yeah.
I was still able to make time for my kids. I was still able to make time for my habits and all of the things. And I was no longer feeling like I was pulled in a thousand directions. And you did that. Like, you presented the space. And even if you weren't like holding my hand through the whole thing and like, okay, tell me about it, you know, like your approach is very different than like going to a therapist and needing somebody to like walk you through step by step. What should I be doing, and giving validation? It gave me permission to like actually listen. So that's just a side point to Liza here. Like,
Yeah.
that's my own personal experience. So if that doesn't sell you on coming and listening to her at the conference, I don't know what does.
Yeah. Oh, I love that because it's such a personal testimony of what actually happens with the work that I do and the work that I've had to do for myself,
Yeah.
right? And learning that there's just noise. There's like interference that kind of creeps up in our lives, and that can be health wise. And for me personally, like I will have seasons where I experience a lot of chronic pain, and that, I'm just coming out of another season of that. And man, if I'm in pain, like, and I'm not sleeping well, things get funky. And, so I'm like, okay, how do I need to, those are the seasons of life that have really pushed me into like, how do I come back here? And so for me, there's so many people out there that have so many pieces to the puzzle. But for me, it was discovering and rediscovering in a lot of ways, like my nervous system, this whole
Yeah.
bodily system that people are starting to hear, we're learning more about because of COVID and talking about our bodies and the effects of trauma and all of that. And then also like our emotional systems, how are like our emotions and those aspects of our personality and maybe old thought patterns like creeping in and kind of taking over. And when that can all step back and just have, give that space, then that's where that calm is that thing that really resonates with a lot of women. But it's that space of like love and joy and peace, and being to really able to fully experience that without having the filter of these other emotions and inner agendas that sometimes run in our subconscious that we don't know about. And so that's a huge part of what I do, is helping women discover like you were designed to protect yourself in a lot of ways, right? In the trauma field, we talk about that a lot, but man, you were also designed to heal. And for those of us in that faith-based community, you were designed like in that space, you can meet the healer in really, really beautiful and profound ways. So
Yes. So I was just talking to my friend Shannon. The end of July, beginning of August, like kind of a hard time for me. I lost my grandpa in high school in July. Never got to say goodbye. Like, just always had some trauma around that. Lost my best friend from childhood in a car accident a few years later. And now this year, my grandma passed away back in February, but we didn't have her burial because of just weather and family things. We ended up doing it in July. And so right after the 4th of July, we were up there, and I realized it had been like 18 years since I had been to see my grandpa and like revisited it. And I was like, every July-ish, whether I'm like acknowledging it or not, it's like that I still have trauma that is like subconsciously in there. And she was like, okay, so your stress doesn't know if you're being chased by a lion, or if, like your fight or flight doesn't understand if it's a real imminent threat or not. Like, it just skyrockets. And so being able to like recognize that and be in tune to yourself. And what I love about what you do is you work with the nervous system, which we all know, like grounding it. One of the activities that I do with my oldest has some sensory things, some trauma from birth that we're working through. Like that's a whole nother story. But like, what's something you can see right now? What's something you can feel right now? What's something you can hear? What do you taste? What do you smell right now? Just working through those senses so that she can get back in the present moment and move past whatever it is that's heightening her anxiety at the time. And so being able to work with your nervous system in a way that's like that, most of the people that I've encountered are not Christians who do this work.
Yep.
And they are energy healers. They are telling you that the universe is doing these things. And so when I met you and you were a woman of not just faith, but of strong faith who lives biblically, not just by what, modern day Christians are manipulating to be like, that was something so huge and such a great connection for me to make with you because I feel like it's really easy to get lost, and we know that we need these things in our lives and we need to regulate our nervous system, but finding the right person to help you facilitate that is
Yeah.
like the whole point of all of this. Like you need to do it in a way where like you're not saying I can heal you,
Yeah.
like you're
Yes.
saying no, let me get you to a place where you can be healed.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
open to it with God, the true healer. I don't
Yeah.
know. There's
Yep.
just something so powerful about that
Yeah.
piece of what you do.
Yes, I love that. And for me, it all comes back to understanding that we're spirit, soul, and body. And
Yeah.
so often we've like disconnected from the body, and there've been other realms of like healing and things like that where like they've kind of taken that up. But man, for me, I'm like, where's the science? Where's
Yeah.
the science? Show me, like, can I register this in biology somewhere, in psychology? So even what you were talking about with like going back and kind of like your body reliving some things from 18 years ago, like one of the things for me is that your body remembers what your mind forgets.
Yeah.
And that one of the really important things to understand about trauma is like there's traumatic memories. That's a trauma that's stored in parts of our brain where there's no timestamp. So when that's hit, it feels like
It's first you.
you're
Yeah.
that age again. And you're so right, that initiates that limbic response and puts us into fight flight, and that's where that phrase triggered comes from. Like it's old information in your system that's getting poked at,
Yeah.
and you're living not only just in your body, but from what I do from the psychology or an IFS standpoint is there are actually like aspects of our personality that have kind of like held on to those young memories and in those young places. And so I don't know if you have ever thought of this, but you know maybe you can think of a time where you had an interaction with someone or you did get triggered and you're like, oh dang, I actually like that felt what came out of me felt really young, you
Yeah.
know? Um, or interacting with this person, I'll often ask like if there's a hard interaction with someone, I'll be like, okay, let's just take a little bit of time to reflect. How old did you feel in that interaction? And they'll be like, oh, okay. And then how old did that person feel
Yeah.
when you were interacting with them? And so, even like this has been helpful for me and my husband. Sometimes when we're getting in arguments, it's like, oh, okay, we're 16 in this interaction right now. We're not 43 and 49. We're like our teenagers are coming out strong in this interaction. Like, let's just step back and come back to being adults.
But the whole point is that you recognize it and you're able to
Yes.
like move on from it and
Yes.
almost kind of laugh about it. And that's something that I have to constantly remind myself. It's easier for me to recognize that for myself, but for our oldest daughter. And there are, like you said, there are different personalities that it seems to have a bigger effect on. My middle child can roll right off and she'll be fine. My youngest, she basically will give you the middle finger and walk away and she's over it. It's done. It never comes up again. Like she's like whatever. But my oldest, she's 8, and I don't talk a ton about it because it'll be her story to tell someday. But she had a very traumatic birth. She failed the newborn screen. We ended up taking her to the NICU on our own, like our doctor called, and we drove her there, which they'd never done before, accepted a baby that had been at home for a day and then came into it. Like, she was poked, she was prodded, they ran so many tests on her, and she started having sensory issues that were, I mean, at like 12 months old, like refused to wear socks, like had a holy fit if socks were on, and so we found out through physical therapy and just different things that if this was still happening at like 7 or 8, it's probably a trauma response to how she came into this world, basically. And so she's been doing therapy and doing stuff. But when she's triggered, she goes back into baby talk. She goes back into needing her blanket, her security blanket, and she just wants to be left alone, and she eventually will come out of it, and if you leave her alone, it happens much quicker. But that's all things that we know and we're working on. Her personality type is so much different than the other two, but I'm like that, and I can see myself in her, and I know what a struggle things were all through my childhood and into my young adult life until I recognized some of these things. And so having someone like you in even a child's life can be life changing. I think of, like, if we'd known the things that we know now when I was a kid,
I know.
how amazing would that have been? And yeah, I just have to keep reminding my husband, like, no, we do not want our 8-year-old talking like a baby, but that just means there's more work to do.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what a blessing for this generation. Like when you think even the trauma field didn't even really emerge, until we were maybe like, born or just a little bit, before that. So this is all very new information that's permeating the culture now. The fact that like for you that like you're working on that's generational impact. That's so huge. Yeah. And so a huge part of my background is I was an autism team leader and worked with kids with autism, diagnosis of autism, sensory processing disorders, things like that for almost a decade. And then I went into ministry for about another decade and got to a point where I was like, I was hitting walls. I was, I'd say things like, I feel like I'm running on a treadmill. That's too fast for me. I can't keep up. I would like have these crashes where I'd have like a migraine and be knocked out for 3 days, and then I'd come back and be ready to go again. It was just like, and finally it got to a point where my body just shut everything down. It just like, I hit a wall so hard that I had no choice but to find answers. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd already be crying and shaking. My body was just like responding to all these things. So I was going to a therapist and kind of like an inner healing prayer person, and they both gave me books on trauma in the same week. And I was like, okay, well, there's something here. And that's really what brought me back to nervous system work. Like all of the things that we do with kiddos, just like what's happening with your child now, that doesn't have to be specialized, like we need those things too. Our nervous systems are just as like important, and especially as when it comes to trauma, a lot of that translates for us too. And then I just happened to find some other things that worked really, really well for me and got certified in it, and now get to teach it to people. But
Which
all of
is
that is so full
amazing.
circle. Yeah.
Yes. And it's funny that you talk about that, because that's what my talk is going to be on, is like your journey through entrepreneurship and how we feel like it should look this way, and it definitely does not look
Right.
anything like that.
Right. Yes,
But
yes.
the fact that you've been able to merge, you did something for 10 years, and then you did something else for 10 years, and now what you're doing is an accumulation of how God prepared you to be at this exact moment and helping the people that you're helping in the way that you're helping them. And I literally have goosebumps from like on my head down to my toes right now, just thinking about how amazing that is, that it took you to get to that point. And it would have been really easy to be angry and be like, God, why are you doing this? Like, why can't my body just do what it's supposed to do? But what it was that moment where he was like, you've been ignoring me. Like, do I have your attention now? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I was actually thinking about it yesterday. I was like, you know, it would have been really, because one of my considerations coming out of high school is to be a therapist.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, I don't know if I could like do that. I think that'd be really hard. But now it's like 20 years later. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. Like there are certain people that are specialized to work with certain types of people. I have my certain type of people that I work with, just to be super clear about that. But like, it's so like that I had to go through my own journey, and it's a journey of hope too, right? Like
yes,
did spend months in bed, almost like it was hard to get out of bed and force myself to even go get a drink of water in the morning and make sure I was eating enough. And like I had hit so hard.
yeah,
But it's also a story of redemption and a story of hope, and a story of God's goodness, to be on the other side of those things and to look back and to see like God's hand in every single moment to get you from here to there it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
yes. Oh my gosh. My husband struggled with that too a little bit when I left teaching, because he was like, you still have student loans from becoming a teacher and you're leaving the profession altogether. And I'm like, hi, yes, it is me. I am doing that. But it got to the point where I had been talking about leaving, and I had this 5-year plan, and I was going to do all these things. And all of a sudden my school board didn't like my stance on teacher mental health and how schools should be taking that into consideration, especially coming out of the COVID era into the transitioning back into the classroom and all the extra expectations that were going to be on them.
Yes.
And they presented me a letter that said, we can dictate your secondary employment. We no longer support your business. So it's us or it's your business. I think it was 3 weeks before school started in 2020, that fall. And I walked out and I called my husband. I had tears streaming down my face. I said, I just quit my job. And I was in a complete panic. He's self-employed. So there went all of our benefits, any stability that we had, an entire income. My kids only had ever known me being in the building where they were at for daycare and
Yeah.
school and everything else. Like, I basically, in a matter of 30 seconds, made a decision that uprooted our entire lives. And now we fast forward 3 years, and I can't even imagine what life would be like if I was still in that situation. But once again, it took something so drastic for me to like walk away and do what I'd been called to do and knew I'd been called to do it for years. I mean, it was a good solid 3 years that I felt that pull. And I was like, when I'm ready, I will leave. When I'm ready, I will leave. And finally God was like, you're not ready, but I will make you ready.
I totally understand that. That has been a pattern for me where I will stay probably about a year longer in a situation than I need to, because I'm like, I'm just going to make this work. I'm going to show up. Yeah, no. Okay.
I can power through. It'll be fine. I'm strong enough. And God's like, I don't care. Yes, you are, but that's not what we're doing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. 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 And yeah, I
Oh,
think that's where like discernment and all of that really comes in too. And being able to discern through a lens that isn't
yes.
trauma, you know?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, and that's Heather, one of the other speakers at the conference. She's talking about how obedience is a blast. And I'm like, people are going to read that and they're going to be like, I'm going to leave before this. It's no, I'm just kidding. But I used to have such a hard time with obedience. And if somebody told me not to do something, I would do it twice just to say, see. Like, that's just like, it's a part of my personality that I've had to really like condition to not be present.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that discernment and that obedience, and it's funny how I don't really go into picking my speakers with a really solid plan. I don't know if I should admit that to people, but I am like, that person, there's just something in my brain that says that
Yeah.
person, that person, that person. And I've yet to be turned down really to have
Yeah.
speakers at this conference. So this is the second year, we're going on 8 speakers, and I've yet to really be turned down. But all of the speakers have aligned so
Yes.
perfectly
So great.
every year, and the things that you're going to talk about align with what Heather's going to talk about, and that aligns with what I'm going to talk about, and then Maddie and Melissa's speeches tie into what I'm also going to talk about. And so it's like this giant web of like, come and you are going, it's like a holistic approach that is really unplanned for
Right. Yes.
to
Yes.
happen.
I love that. That means that's going to bless some people. There are going to be people that are coming or they're on the fence and they're hearing this and are like, okay, I know there's something special and I need to be a part of that. I need to come. So yeah, if you're a person that's on the fence, just come.
Exactly. You
We'll
will
be
not be
back.
disappointed. And I'm not just
No.
saying that because I want you to come. Like,
Right.
it is, there's something so powerful. And you came last year, you attended the conference, and people ask me to describe it, and I'm like, I don't have words. So maybe you're better at describing.
Yeah.
I struggle too.
Oh, I loved it. I loved the atmosphere from first walking in. It was just it was warm, it was welcoming, it was like um it was calm. That's like
Yes.
it was just open. And the every speaker, like you know, a lot of times you go to conferences and you're like, can't even remember the name of that person that spoke, but every speaker I can remember something that stood out and was important. And then the connections, like there was just so much space for connections, and what has come out of that conference for me personally has been just so rich and fulfilling, but also for my business has been huge. So it's just like there's so many, it really is, it's community, it's encouragement, it's connection. And I walked out of there and the gals that are with, we were just like, that's amazing, we're coming back next year. So yes.
And a little did you know, you aren't just
We are, yes,
back,
I am
you're
actually
coming back this year. By popular demand, you're coming.
coming.
Oh, I love it. Yes, and that is kind of exactly what I wanted. I wanted a space for all of those things for women. And I connected with so many people. And honestly, I walked away feeling like during the networking parts, I felt like I just kind of wandered around because I didn't know what I should personally be doing. And I'm like, dang, I missed out on so much of that relationship building and being present with the people and really getting to know people and their stories. But what came from it was, now, even almost a year later, I'm still making connections with people that came to last year's conference. And that's amazing. And just even getting to know you, and Melissa attended and Heather attended last year, and just knowing the relationships that we built and are able to bring a second conference is just phenomenal. And to know that that happened for other people's businesses, being in that same room and not just for the conference itself, is makes my heart so happy, because that was the whole point of the entire event. So
That's so good.
yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you could be here with me today. Is there anything that you want to share that you're like, I have to get this out into the world or I'm going to regret it?
Man, no, I feel like we hit on so much. But the one thing that I always come back to is like, so often we don't know what we don't know. So if something hit or resonated, or even like hearing part of my story or some of the things that you shared, like you make sense. You make sense. And it's not what you're experiencing, maybe in your body and your emotions. It's not something that you have to push away or shame away or like, you know, fight against. They're actually just, man, if you can get into that space where you can heal and be released from those past burdens, be released into what God has next for you. That's such a powerful thing. Just gets me so excited for people and their story and God's story in their lives. So.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that. Where can people come and find you? Like, where do you like to hang out with
Yeah.
people in on the internet, whatever?
Yes, I'm on Instagram. It's at liza.heidelberger. I've been really quiet on there, but you can like come talk to me and I will interact with you. And then I'm on Facebook and my website is lizaheidelberger.com. So
Perfect. I will link all of that in the show notes so that's
great.
super accessible for everybody. But thank you so much for being here today. And both Liza and I are going to be here cheering you on.
Yes. Thank you.